Once upon a time, there was a lady, her name was Mary Reed, and she was a school teacher. She was a school teacher here in the United States, but she felt a call, a desire to go do something in terms of missions work. This was at the height of when, missions was more or less the fad. It was what everybody was doing in the late 19th century. It was just the thing to do. And so she decided, I'm going to go and be a missionary. She did not realize how difficult that would be. She was 30 years old in 1884 when she left to go to India and be a missionary. And in those days, if you're 30 years old and you're not married, there's a problem. And that was one of the reasons that she left. I mean, if you look at a picture of Mary, she was not an unattractive person, but for some reason it wasn't working out. And I think that the Lord really wanted to say, are you out here in India to serve me, or are you out here because you couldn't get married in the States? I mean, which one is it? And as she was working out there for the first few years, she began to really develop a serious compassion for the people that she was working with. But she began to feel ill, which was not uncommon in the late 1800s, especially if you're going from the United States to the tropics. And she was not feeling well, so she took some time off, and she went to Chandog province to recover. And while she was there, she saw a colony of the untouchables and lepers and sick and deformed in this one area. And her heart just went out to these people. But she thought, I'm a white girl from the United States. I mean, they can't relate to me. I don't know anything about them. She had a sense of compassion, but no way of doing anything about it. Well, she continued to feel ill. So much so that after 6 years on the mission field, they said, you need to go back to the States and get yourself recovered. So she did. She went back to the United States in 1890 and went to the best doctors in the land to find out what's going on. And the doctors said, I'm sorry to tell you, after diagnosing you, you have Hansen's disease, leprosy. You go off to the mission field thinking you're going to do something great for God, and you get an incurable disease that's it's going to kill you, it's going to deform you. I mean, how would you feel? And in that moment, Mary Reed had a choice to make. I'm either going to blame God or I'm going to trust God. Which choice am I going to make? She wrote in her diary, and I quote, I have not yet received my assurance of healing. Perhaps I can serve my Father better thus. She made a different choice. She said, if this is what you have allowed, I will find a way to work through what you have allowed to be your servant. And that's when it occurred to her, who better to identify with lepers than another leper? So she went back to India, and it was a sad thing because when she left, she couldn't tell her family that she had this disease. They didn't know how it was spread. And so she said to her sister, look, I've got this. I've got to go back. I don't want you to tell anybody. So basically, I'm not going to say goodbye, because if I say goodbye to anybody, they're going to want to kiss and hug me before I get on the train. And I can't afford that they might get this disease. So she literally left in stealth, which is something you don't do in 1890, and everybody was scandalized until they found out later what was the reason. But what's interesting about Mary Reed is that when she got back to the mission field, She began to work in that group because she was one of them. She could identify with their pain and with their suffering in a way that no one else could. And she brought the gospel to them. And tens of thousands got saved. She planted a church. The woman gave the rest of her life. And listen to what God did. A person with leprosy who would normally not expect to live very long. She lived to be 84. 84. She served 52 years as the head of that leper colony because she could identify when no one else could and lived a full life. That is amazing in and of itself. But God used her suffering to reach the suffering. She understood the concept of what was eternally important. She was a great woman of God. She knew him. It's amazing how compassion can drive us to get beyond our own discomforts, our own complaints. How many of you have got complaints? I got lots. Okay, we all have complaints. We complain about our house not being as big or as pretty as we would like. Go with us to Haiti, and I will show you some houses. And you will not complain about yours anymore. We complain about, I've got this pain, I've got that pain. I will take you to a place where you can see people that don't have their arms and legs because they've fallen off. It's amazing how compassion can take us to quit looking at those discomforts and those problems and start seeing things the way God sees things. That's what compassion is all about. And there's some exciting things that are happening here at 14:6 right now. And that excitement is just going to get bigger. It's just going to get better. We are reaching out from a compassionate point of view to try to reach an entire generation that is being currently brainwashed by a system that says they are just animals. And they will teach them the theory of evolution from kindergarten. But we, because of compassion for an entire generation of helpless children that are being fed lies, we have sacrificed, we have worked hard. There are people here that work for next to nothing or nothing in order to keep our academy going because of compassion. And the academy is flourishing because of that. There are exciting things happening here. This coming Saturday, we have an outreach to go and feed the homeless downtown because of compassion. We have an entire team here that is willing to sacrifice and do whatever it takes in order to be able to fly 20 hours back to a third world country to see what we can do to help people that are starving to death because of compassion. There are exciting things happening here. There are great classes that we teach because we have compassion. Jesus, it says, looked out at the crowd and he had compassion. He said, they're like sheep without a shepherd. And what did he do? He went and taught them. He taught them because of compassion. We put videos up online because of compassion. We teach a women's class coming up. We teach, why the Bible can be trusted. We teach these things out of compassion because we have an entire world that is literally wandering around in the dark, going to hell, and they're believing lies. But because of compassion, we're willing to reach out and do something about it. And you're a part of that. You support that. Because you're a part of it, we can do that. But here's an important truth we need to get today. Anyone can do good things. There are plenty of government programs that are doing good things, but how many of you know the government is not serving the living God? So anybody can do good things. But you see, God wants something more from us than just doing good things. He wants us to become good people. which is an entirely different thing. And that's what I want to talk about this morning, because as I've said many times to you, you are what you are becoming. You know, what you practice, well, that's what you perform. So what we want to do is we want to go a little bit deeper. See, last week we got to Colossians chapter 3, verse 12, and we read this. It says, therefore, because you've been saved, because God has rescued you from eternal death, as God's chosen people, you're holy and dearly loved. What do I want you to do? I want you to clothe yourself with compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness and patience. I want you to bear with each other. I want you to forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. I want you to forgive as the Lord has forgiven you. And over all of these virtues that I just listed out, I want you to put on agape love, because that's what binds all of this together. And we talked last week about what is agape love. But today, I want to go back and take a look at these virtues. I want to see what it means, because it says, clothe yourself with compassion. So when he says clothe yourself, he means put this on like you would put on a jacket or a sweater or something. This is an intentional action. Do you see that? I mean, compassion is, he's saying these virtues are they're not magic. They're things you have to intentionally put on. And how many of you know we get in habits of what we're going to wear? I mean, we do. We get in habits. My wife often says, there's half a dozen shirts in that closet, Pat, that you don't touch. You own them, but you never wear them. Why? Because they're not comfortable. And how many of you know that men sacrifice fashion for comfort every time? Okay? Every time. Hence, one of my favorite shirts. Now, we get in habits of what we're going to wear. It's intentional. And the Holy Spirit is saying here in Colossians, he's saying, listen, believer, if you follow me, if you serve me, if you really want to walk behind me, I want you to get into the habit of putting this kind of clothing on every day. How many of you know you put your clothes on every day? I hope. Because if you don't, it's a bad day. If you're wandering down the street and you got nothing, people are going to stop and stare at that. Or pick you up and put you in a little wagon. But anyway, you got to look at this. He's saying, I want you to put it on. In fact, Jesus, how many of you know that Jesus, he didn't just teach, he did, and his doing was an illustration. He was not saying, just do as I do, or do as I say. He's going, do as I do. And so Jesus showed us what compassion is by doing it. Flip over to Mark chapter 1 to see what I'm talking about. Verse 40 says this. It says, there was a man with leprosy, and he came to him, and he begged him on his knees, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And filled with compassion, Jesus reached out his hand and he touched the man. He said, I am willing, be clean. I am willing, be clean. See, compassion, if you look it up in the dictionary, compassion is, and I'll read it, the sympathetic consciousness of others' distress together with a desire to alleviate it. In other words, you sympathize, you're aware of somebody else's distress, and you make a decision, you connect that understanding with a desire to go do something about it. That's what compassion is. It's not just sympathy, because sympathy can just be sympathy. It doesn't do anything. See, empathy is where I go, well, I've been in those shoes, I can understand you. But it still doesn't do anything. Compassion is taking an understanding. It's much deeper. It's doing something. And it's not just doing anything. We've got to be very, very cautious to understand what compassion is and how to walk in it. You see, compassion in Greek here is actually two words in Greek. Now, Greek has a glottal in your throat when you speak Koine Greek. So I'm going to try to get this right. because my professors are always saying, no, get it in there. All right. This word is splachnon oiktermos. Splachnon oiktermos. I got to get that in there so my professor's happy. But anyway, the King James Version translates this bowels of mercy. That is the grossest picture I can think of. I just don't, splachnon, it even sounds gross. So what does he mean? Why two words? You see, it's actually, these two words are put together. They're designed to get you to see the depth of what compassion really is. You see, the first word, splachnon, means the viscera or the gut, the bowels. It means all of this down here. And the word oiktermos means pity, compassion, care. So in other words, what he's talking about is he's saying compassion is that sickening gut reaction, that adrenaline rush that drops right into your stomach where you go, oh, when you see something. When you see a poor starving child and you go, oh, and it gets you here. That's a whole lot bigger than just some sympathy. That's a whole lot bigger than, oh, that's bad. Oh, how sad. I saw it on Facebook. No, this is something that makes you just want to, you got to put your hand up. You're just, oh my gosh, what do I do? That's compassion. It's feeling it from here. That's why you'll go to the ends of the earth to help somebody. Because it drives you from here. To give you an example of what I mean by splachnon oiktermos, there once was a lady in Sweden. She got into some kind of a horrible streetcar accident. The streetcar came off the tracks and she was pinned underneath it. She was bleeding severely. It was gross. She was torn open and they could not, nobody, you can't lift a streetcar. She's going to die. And how many of you know when you see something like that, there's going to be a great big crowd of people standing there going, let me watch, and do nothing, which is the majority of people. And they're all thinking in their mind, I can't do anything. I can't lift a streetcar. I'm not a doctor. This is pre-cell phone days, so even getting the word out, somebody ran and there was a phone call made, but it's going to be how long before the paramedics arrive? She's not going to make it. So let's just stand around and watch her die, which is what most people will do. But there was one man. He was so moved. He went, oh my, the blood, and she's not going to make it. And she's screaming. She's terrified. And this man got down on his knees, crawled right through that blood and guts to lay down next to her and look her in the eye and said, just hold my hand. Hold my hand. I got you. He couldn't do anything more than that. But that move from here, that compassion, drove him to crawl down under there to get a hold of her hand. Just hold my hand. What good is that going to do? But the truth of the matter is, it did all the good in the world. Because she looked at him and held on to his hand, looking him in the eye. And it calmed her. And her heart rate went down. And instead of falling into shock, she began to calm, even with the pain, even with the blood. The paramedics finally arrived, and long story short, she survived. Nobody thought she could live. But the paramedics said to this man, you saved her life. Because you calmed her down. She was bleeding out. Her heart rate cut in half just because you were holding onto her hand and looking her in the eye. Kept her from going into shock. You saved her life just by holding her hand. Why was only one man driven to respond? Splanknon oiktermos, from the gut. Compassion drove him to do something. She said later, I never knew the touch of a hand could mean so much. Just the touch of a hand. Mother Teresa said that loneliness is the greatest of poverty. Oftentimes, people would just melt just simply because she would reach out and touch them. Just touch them when no one else would. My wife is often after me about always hugging my family when I come in and when I go out. Yes. And being male, I'm like, what, you know? But over the years, begun to kind of like this whole hugging thing. This touch, connection, compassion, love. It's powerful stuff. It'll connect your family. It'll connect your church. It'll connect you to the King, and He will connect you like He did with Mary Reed to the untouchables that He wants to reach through you. But you have to be willing to put it on. See, compassion is that thing that drives you to sacrifice your time, your energy, and your money to go off to Haiti the way we just did. And we're going again on December 26th. You got that picture up there? This is the group that was cooking for our the conference we were at. Now, guys, it occurred to me while we were there that they were cooking the one meal that these guys were going to eat in 3 days. One meal. And then I realized there's no motels around here. There's no hotels. Where are these 300 people staying? And the answer was sleeping on the concrete in the church, which doesn't have bathrooms. There's no bathrooms there. They just go out and use the bushes. They walked for miles to come and spend 3 days and get one meal to hear us teach them how to teach others about Jesus. That gets me right here. Makes me want to go back. It drives me. This is the reason we're going next week out to help the homeless. Why do we go out there? It's not a gimmick. It's because you get driven from here to go, I got to go do something about that. That's what compassion is. You've got to learn how to put that on. Take a look back at what Jesus did here in Mark chapter 1. The man with leprosy came to him and begged him on his knees and said, if you're willing, you can make me clean, but I want you to notice something. The chance to have compassion came to Jesus, not the other way around. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you think about it for a second, how many of you know there were probably a lot of lepers in Israel in those days? Why didn't Jesus, with all of His mighty power, snap His fingers and heal everybody in the entire country? Do you think He could have done that? Please say yes. With a thought. But He didn't. You know why? He wants to teach you and I something. We need to respond. Listen, we need to learn to be the kind of people that are in the habit of responding to the opportunity that's right in front of our face. You don't need to go look for it. It'll be right in front of you. And Jesus took the time to deal with that problem that was right in front of Him, to reach out and touch, to act in compassion to the person that was right in front of Him, to teach you, His disciple, to be the same kind of person. Because how many of you know there are plenty of people out there that when they see an opportunity to act in compassion will think in the back of their mind, I don't have time for this. Neither did Jesus, but He made time. How many of you know He was one busy guy? Constantly everybody after Him. But He would, whoa, stop everything. Opportunity's right in front of me. Leave me alone, I'm busy. Because I'm going to take the time. Tough to do, but it's a habit we need to get into. We need to deal with the opportunity that's right in front of us, because that's what God expects us to do if we're going to clothe ourselves with this kind of virtue, if we're going to become this kind of person, if we're going to develop this kind of habit, if we're going to be like Jesus. We've got to respond to the opportunity to be compassionate that's right in front of our face. Because it would have been easy, would have been really, really easy for Jesus to think in his heart, there's lots of lepers out there. Why am I dealing with just this one? There are a lot of people that see an opportunity in front of them and they say, well, you know what? There's a lot of other people that can deal with this problem. Why do I have to deal with it? I understand this. I get this. I mean, here's an opportunity that's right in front of you. Your church. Your church is right in front of you. You're sitting in it. It doesn't get more in your face than this. It's right here. There's an opportunity to do, I'll give you a list. I could make every single one of you busy. Easy. Busier than you want to be. Trust me. For free. Now, here's the thing. It's easy to get weary of hearing all the time how much there's needs here at this church. How many times you've heard me say, we need help in children's ministry. You get weary of hearing it, and in the back of your mind, you're going, that's not my ministry, that's not my thing, I don't have time for that, somebody else will do that, somebody else is gifted there, not me. Every opportunity in the world to say no to it, to get tired of hearing it. But then I ask myself, how do I answer that? Because I get tired of saying it. I get tired of saying it. I get tired of going, I need more help, I need more help, I need more help, I need more help. Well, you know what we need? We need people that are going to be driven from their gut to see that, wait a minute, if I go and invest in children's ministry over here, I'm having compassion on children. Because I'm moved from here to go, if I pour time and energy and effort into this child to teach them about Jesus, then the devil will not snatch them away as he does to 88% of the kids that grow up in a Christian home. 88% of children that grow up in a Christian home will walk away from Jesus between the ages of 16 and 25. Have compassion on that and go, no, I want to change that. I want to start a youth group. I want to work in the children. I want to have compassion to go, I'm going to make a difference. But you get tired of hearing about it. You get tired of hearing. I understand that. But there's an opportunity right in front of you. And I wonder to myself, there's lots of starving people in the world, aren't there? Lots of them. Let's go to Africa. Lots of starving people. Should we get tired of hearing about that too? Somebody say no. Should we get tired of that? I mean, honestly, let's think about it for a second. How annoying is this? You got all these starving people, you go out and feed them, and a week later they're starving again. So why bother? How many of you know there's lots of people that have that attitude? Lots of people. Jesus says, no, don't have that attitude. Have the attitude that if you're breathing, you have an opportunity to glorify me by being compassionate. And because there's always going to be another starving person, and there's always going to be another child that needs your investment, and because there's always going to be someone else that needs your compassion, I'm going to give you so many opportunities to rack up some serious coin in heaven. Serious. Isn't that a great opportunity? See, we're looking at it the wrong way. We're going, I'm tired of hearing about needs. I got my own needs. And God's going, quit worrying about your needs. You start seeking my kingdom. I'll take care of all that stuff. Didn't he say that in Matthew chapter 6, verse 44? Did he say that? Yes, say yes. Are you paying attention? Yeah, he said that. Seek first the kingdom of God. Remember that part? That's what compassion is. It's moving differently. It's in a different habit. You see, when you think along the lines of somebody else will do that, or I'm tired of hearing about that, you miss the point. There are lots of needs. But God's going to put needs right in front of your face. You don't need to go looking for them. You're right. There's always going to be starving people. There's always going to be neglected children. There's always going to be somebody out there. And don't get weary of it. In fact, Jesus says, don't get weary of doing good because in due time you're going to get blessed for it. Don't get weary of that. What you got to do is you got to get your mind on my kingdom and off of yourself. And this church is right in front of you. This church works hard to find things that we can be involved in that give you an opportunity to do good things. So on Saturday, I expect to see about half of this church coming out and helping Adam and get out there and feed the homeless. Why not? It's an opportunity. It's right there. Are you with me? Somebody say amen. I want to make sure you say. I'm not trying to preach down at you. I'm not trying to get you to feel guilty. I'm trying to get you to see what Jesus saw. He had an opportunity. He reached out and did something. And it says in Mark, immediately he reached out and touched him. I love that word immediately. There was no, let me pray about that. See if that's going to work for me. No. His compassion went, now. Opportunity. Got to do something about it. You see that? And he says, go and do likewise. If you're his disciple, that's what you get to do. In fact, compassion is responding to the right opportunity that's right in front of you. That's what it is. But let's go into it a little bit deeper. It says in Mark 1:41 that filled with compassion, Jesus reached out his hand and he touched the man. Now again, he didn't pray about it. He wasn't too busy to get involved. He wasn't saying, that's not my ministry. That's not my gifting. He had none of those excuses. God the Father put that leper right in front of him, and he went, okay, I'm going to deal with that. God the Father is going to put opportunity right in front of you, starting at this church, for you to get involved and go do great things. Because the more you connect with him, the more opportunity he's going to give you to do. Why? Because when you do, you're going to do what? You're going to grow like never before. That's why we painted it on the wall. That's what being a disciple is all about. And you and I need to get in that opportunity. But I also want you to understand something else. This is really, 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 really important. Did I emphasize it enough? He not only responded, listen, but he responded the right way. Now, this is really important. The right way. Now, why do I say that? Because love is compassion. But compassion is not always love. There is a difference here. That's why he says at the end of that scripture, he says, wrap love around all of these virtues, because if you don't, it's going to get messed up. You see, compassion, listen, compassion that is not guided by agape, seeking the highest and the best interest of someone else. That's what love is, right? We looked at that last week. But you see, compassion that's not guided by that can become enabling. You see the difference? It can become enabling. And we don't want to go there. You know, sometimes when you enable things, you actually lead to greater problems. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is to say, no, I won't bail you out, son. No, I'm going to let you feel that one. Does that make sense? Got to take some wisdom here. Reminds me of a story. I was taking a class back when I was a teacher training class, and the lady who was teaching it was telling the story because we had to take this, just say no to drugs, presentation thing. And she's giving the presentation, and we're getting all grossed out, and, all the things that she's telling us, evil, drugs, bad, all this is going on. And then she told the story, her story. She said, my son got involved in drugs in high school and later fell into heroin. And the problem is that because we made it so easy on him in high school, every time he got into trouble, we bailed him out. So instead of him learning anything, he just went from one drug to the next until he's a heroin addict. And I did not realize, she said at the time, that I thought that being compassionate was every time he got in trouble, I'd run over there and pay his bill. I would run over there and say, come on home, I'll take care of you. He'd get cleaned up for a week or two, and then he'd go out and get blitzed again. And it was just going on and on and on. And finally, I went and I checked him into a rehab place. He was there for about 10 days and escaped, ran away. Came back home and stole everything in the house that wasn't nailed down to go and get drugs. So what did I do? I forgave him and I brought him back home again. And what did he do? stayed stoned. You see the problem? It's one thing to have compassion. It's another thing to know how to have compassion. And this went on and on and on for several years. Every time she got him into rehab, he'd fall right back out again until finally she said, look, I love you enough to tell you that only you can get clean from this. I will no longer help you. The best help I can give you is to say, if you really want to get clean, you will check yourself in yourself and know you can't stay here anymore. You're a big boy. You can figure this out. I'm not going to keep enabling you. And he's out living on the street. Talk about break a mother's heart. It was hard on her. She said it was so hard to know he's out sleeping behind a dumpster in the cold. But I knew that if I kept enabling him, he would not get down to the level where he was willing to go and do something about it. You see, so often the pain of change is so great, we won't go towards change. We will stay with the demon that we know. We've got to get to a place where the pain of staying the same is so great, we're finally willing to go and change. So she kept encouraging every time I see it, I love you. If you get clean, we'll start blessing you. But not until you get clean, and you got to do it on your own. Finally, he goes and checks himself in. Finally, he completed the program. And every step of the way, she rewarded it. He stayed clean for this long, she helped him with this. She stayed clean this long, helped him with this. When she was telling the story, she said he'd been clean for 10 years now. But it wasn't until all of that happened. You see, there's a difference between being compassionate and seeing an opportunity and being wise about how you do that. Does that make sense? See, Jesus was wise. Not only did he see the opportunity in front of him, but it says he reached out immediately and touched the man. Do you think he had to touch the man to heal him? Say no. All he had to do was say the word. But Jesus knew that the right response to somebody who hasn't been touched in years, real healing is, I am willing. Do you see the difference? So we need to know that difference too. See, that's the next point on compassion. Compassion is responding in to the right opportunity, but it's in the right way, and that requires some wisdom. This is another reason, friends, that I encourage you to get involved with what we are doing as a church, because we're taking the opportunities in this city, in this neighborhood, but we pray about it, a lot about it. We have a lot of people that get involved and get their brains together to make sure that what we are doing is the right thing. Are you following me? That's one of the reasons that we work together, is so that our compassion is the right kind. So there are plenty of churches out there that will do things like start a rehab program or something like that, but they don't do it in the right way. They don't use wisdom, and it's not really making a difference. Let me explain what I mean. Go on to Mark chapter 1, verse 42, and take a look at this. It says, immediately the leprosy left him, and he was cured. Jesus then sent him away at once, immediately, right now. And he sent him out with a strong warning. He said, look, see that you don't tell this to anyone, but instead, first thing I want you to do is go show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them. Now, there's a whole sermon in that, but we'll skip it. Instead, he went out and he began to talk freely, spreading news all over the place. And as a result, Jesus could no longer enter a town openly, but stayed outside in lonely places, yet the people still came to him from everywhere. And instead, he went out and began to talk freely, this guy. He's spreading all that news, and he just went all nuts. And what's the point? Why is this there? I got to thinking about it. If compassion is responding to the opportunity that's right in front of me, but it's responding wisely, why did Jesus send this guy off to the priest? Now, like I said, there's a whole sermon in there. But one point comes through to me. Only a priest could declare that leper to be clean, even though he was clean. Does that make sense? He had to go to the priest had to examine him and declare to everybody, this guy's clean. In other words, listen carefully, he had a spiritual need. This is incredibly important. You see, It's easy to meet physical needs, but not lead people to a spiritual response. Let me say that again. It's easy to meet physical needs, but not lead people to a spiritual response. See, too often we help people out, but we don't see any real changes in their life. Jesus made an interesting comment about this. He said in Mark chapter 8, verse 36, he said, but what do you benefit if you gain the whole world, but you lose your own soul? Now, what he means by that is, if you could solve, listen, if this church could right now, today, go out and solve every problem in terms of poverty in the United States of America today, would it really fix anything? Here's the truth. If we were to solve every poverty need, if we were to solve every medical need in the whole world, but it did not lead people to giving their hearts to Jesus, we just wasted our time. Because think about it. Now you got a bunch of healed, happy people going to hell. Wait a second. If all I do is meet their needs in the here and now, and I do not lead them to Jesus, I've really done nothing for them at all. Nothing. You see, we have to respond to the right opportunity. We have to do it in the right way, using wisdom, but we must drive them to a spiritual response. If we do not, we are wasting our time. I think of a number of liberal churches. We'll talk about certain denominations out there. They don't really preach Jesus anymore, but they got a church. They don't even open up the Bible anymore. But they'll tell you how much they love God and believe in God and all this. And they do a lot of compassionate things. They got all kinds of programs. But none of those programs are leading the people they're supposedly helping to Jesus. They've got all kinds of youth programs to give kids an opportunity to stay off the street and stay out of drugs. Yay. But you're not leading them to Jesus? What good does it do? There's plenty of programs out there like that. You see, if we don't lead them to a spiritual response, we're wasting our time. We're wasting our time. Because even if they gained the whole world, but they lost their soul, what benefit is it? You see, that's another reason that getting involved with what we're doing here at the church, we take an opportunity to go help homeless, but we also give them Bibles. We take an opportunity to go down to Haiti, but not just to feed people for a couple of days. We're teaching them the Word of God while we're there. Are you with me? If you're not leading it to a spiritual response, if we do, like we did an outreach, the Harvest Fest outreach for kids, if all it is a bunch of bouncers and games for kids that's quote-unquote an alternative to Halloween, how many of you know they surf around and go to every single one of them for the free candy? They're going to go to every one of the churches that has a Harvest Fest around here. But when they come to ours, they got to go through each one of the trunks that leads them to Jesus before they can get in the door. You want the candy? Listen to this. Step by step. You remember that? Why do we do that? Because if you're just having compassion, but you don't wrap it up in agape, seeking their highest and best interest, their highest and best interest is to give their heart to Jesus Christ. That is more important than being healed. It's more important than eating. It's more important than dealing with your poverty problems. It's more important than your life. It's more important than anything. So if we're going to have compassion, we need to have compassion in the right way, and we need to drive them, draw them to a spiritual response. Reminds me, we had a family here, and I asked permission to tell this story. We had a family that came here. We didn't know them at the time, and they came in, and they had all kinds of financial problems. I mean, it was winter. They were freezing to death, and they came asking us for blankets and a space heater because they didn't have anything. And I got to be honest with you, when this first happened to me, I'm like, what's going on here? I mean, we have lots of people that come through in churches, and they usually want something, and then as soon as they get it, they're gone. Does that make sense? They're usually sponging from one church to the next. And this family, though, they came to me, and I went, really, blankets? Oh, okay. So we went and we met that physical need, but we as a church went, there's more to it than that.
We need to lead them to a spiritual response, which we did. And this family came and said, we'll take that investment. We'll take your help in marriage counseling. We'll take your help spiritually. And they made a spiritual response. And it absolutely revolutionized their whole life, their family, everything. In fact, they lead our homeless ministry today. Isn't that right? It was because of compassion, wasn't it? But we led you to a spiritual response. Is that right? So Adam and Tammy, you see the tears in her eyes. Why? Because we invested from here. But we led them to Jesus. And that made all the difference. And now they go out and help other people that need blankets and lead them to Jesus. That's how this is supposed to work, friends. That's how this is supposed to work. See, Jesus said in Matthew 5:14, he said, look, you're the light of the world. You're a city on a hill, can't be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and they put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand. It gives its light to everyone in the house. And in the same way, let your light shine before men that they may see your good deeds and do what? Have a spiritual response. Praise your Father in heaven. So how can you apply this? What can you do? Look at the bottom of your program. I've given you some ideas that you could check off. You check one of those boxes, it's a physical step that says, I'm going to go do this. And then our prayer team can pray for you directly and specifically. Now, I gave you 3 responses. The first one is you can have compassion on us at this church. And what you can do is you could join that homeless team ministry on this coming March 19th. You can get out there and say, all right, I'll go. I'll sacrifice a Saturday to go pass out food and blankets and things to people in need. I'll do that. You check that box. We give Adam and Tammy your name. They will make sure they contact you. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, you're here to go out and pass those things out. Okay? Another opportunity you could do, we have a special offering coming up on March 27th. You can decide, I'm going to be a part of that. Because I give this much every week. My tithes, my offerings, I've decided to give this much. But I'm going to give this much extra. Why? Because I'm having compassion on who? Let's think about this for a second. When people drive down the street and they see this building, right now, they don't know it's a church. One of the key reasons they don't know it's a church is because it still says Discovery Works right out here on the side of the building because we don't have enough money to paint it. You could have compassion not only on us. I mean, look at these floors. Look down. Everybody look. Say ugly. Everybody, I want to hear it. Ugly. How many of you know that new people coming in who are unchurched and they're looking for something, they're going to be more distracted by checkerboard than they are to listen to me? You could have compassion on new people coming in and going, you know what? You could have compassion on God himself, who said in the book of Haggai, chapter 1, he said, why is it that you're living in your paneled houses, but my house is in a ruin? Consider your ways. Go up to the mountains and get the wood, get the stuff, and come down here and build my house. Then go build your own house. God himself said that. This is God's house. So I'm asking you to pray about that special offering because we need to raise $8,000 in order to finish all this stuff. You can be a part of that. A third thing you could do is you could reach out to those unchurched people. Compassion is, this person is going to hell. They're a friend of mine, but Easter Sunday is coming, and how many of you know the most likely time you're going to get somebody to show up at church is Easter? Christmas is number 2.